Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Go Big or Go Home. I am Old Man Troy, joined by the spectacular youngster Kevin Cunningham, a.k.a. Kid Cunny on Twitter. What's shaking in Florida today? It feels like I'm down in Florida today, youngster.
I know. We were talking before the show, Troy, and you mentioned it was in the 80s, and that's what it is here. Like tops, like 80 degrees is the top today. So you might actually be in warmer weather than I am, which is very weird considering what was going on 2 weeks ago. I'm as
what
you know,
in the front of a blizzard. I mean,
yeah.
that's basically what happened out here.
Yeah.
I'm in the. For those that listen all the time, you know that I record the show on the way home, and so I do apologize if you hear like loud music, honking, cars revving engines, because I don't have an air conditioner today, youngster, and I'm not doing the show with my windows up. No way, no how. There might be some background noise. It could be quite interesting. Maybe somebody will listen to the show because I'm stuck in traffic. So I want people listening in. It's not like I'm buzzing 80 miles an hour doing a show. I literally do this show while I'm stuck in the traffic jam, and then when I'm out of the traffic jam, the show's just about over. So, yeah, maybe somebody will chime in while I'm talking with my windows open. Who knows? But I didn't mean to cut you off there. But, yeah, it's nice and warm. It actually feels very good up here today, youngster.
Yeah, good. No, only thing I was going to say before we get into draft talk and Big Ten guys getting drafted, that's our only topic on the agenda today. So we are seriously probably not going to go an hour this week. I know we didn't even do a show. We didn't do a show last week.
Why do you say that?
I'll shut up. Anyway, weather-wise.
You know I'm laughing at you because we've said this a million times.
I know.
We could text back and forth for an hour. That would be more than a show. So we should probably get right into it. Enough of the little small talk. Okay. Get right to it. NFL draft, Big Ten, 4 players in the first round. Barkley went there right near the top, and then a surprise pick. Ward, to me, and we'll talk about this, Ward surprised me being in the top 10, top 4. Big surprise to me, but I'll tell you what, Kevin, the Big Ten, people want to knock on the Big Ten all they want, but, quality players going to the NFL, a lot of them going to have good NFL careers. It's like anything, you've talked about it a million times. They're lottery picks anyway. There's no sure thing in any of these drafts. You draft a player based on what you hope. But the Big Ten put a number of players in. It was nice to see the representation. I mean, a good quality conference and good quality players going to some teams.
Yeah. I'll start with Barkley at number 2. Like you mentioned, though, all these guys are lottery tickets, and everyone wants to say, Barkley is the next this, Barkley is the next that. Barkley is a phenomenal person. Barkley can do it all. Today's NFL, perfect process, not perfect prospect, but as perfect as you can basically ask for. And yet, people really liked Trent Richardson. And he went top 5 a few years ago, and he's, out of the league? I mean, that's, a surefire, unbelievable, great, another great Alabama running back. Doesn't do anything in the NFL. So nobody's a sure thing. Nobody's, his floor is, a really good starter in the league. No. I mean, anyone can just tear their ACL and boom, you're done. I mean, there is no, you can say barring injury, I guess, but nobody's safe from injury, especially a running back, especially Saquon Barkley, especially if he's lining out in the slot like a Le'Veon Bell, especially if he's catching 5-7 passes a game.
I'm going to tell you something, youngster. This is going to be the show probably where I just interrupt you a lot and as you talk, because I want to say this. Everybody's like, oh, the Giants, they're great now. They got Barkley. They need to address their offensive line. If that offensive line doesn't get better, Barkley's not going to do crap. I mean, we talked about Eli Manning and the quarterback that he is. Well, nobody can play behind that offensive line. You can address it on paper all you want. But if that offensive line does not get better in 2018, Barkley's not going to put up these gaudy numbers everybody thinks he's going to, because that line was terrible last year. And so I know they got a good player, and like you're saying, you're going through it. I know where you're going with that. But, man, even if this guy stays healthy, gets his 20 touches, gets his 4 or 5 receptions, that line was bad. I don't care how good of a running back you are, you're not going to do crap until they address that line and make it better. So I think in today's show, Youngster, probably going to be a lot of the old man interrupting you. And there's somebody honking, agreeing with me right there.
I heard that. Yeah, that sounds perfectly fine to me. I like when you interrupt me, seriously, because it just, it gets me going on something else or whatever. I almost appreciate you interrupting me, as weird as that sounds. But so the Giants, to go to them for a second, it's like, do you take just the best offensive player because you have Eli Manning, because you believe in Davis Webb from a year ago, that you drafted from Cal in round, I don't remember what it was, something around the third. People liked him. It might have been a second-round pick. But people liked him, and I liked him coming out of college. I think he could, especially if he's able to sit behind Eli Manning and learn for a couple of years. I like his chances. I really do. So coming into this draft, I thought, if you've got Darnold sitting there, Rosen sitting there, those are the top 2 guys to me. Obviously not to every team, as we learned. But if you've got those guys, it's like, how do you pass
Good
that
thing
up?
this isn't the Cleveland show, Youngster. Good thing. But that's going to be one doozy. I'm gonna prop us right now. If you're an NFL fan, you need to follow us on Twitter, at TroyRobert967, at KidCunny, because we do a Cleveland-based show. For those that have never listened before, if you want to hear the old man and Youngster get worked up probably at the same time, follow us on Twitter so you can have the link to that show. That one's going to be a doozy, Youngster. We're going to record that one on Thursday, I believe, depending on our schedules. It airs on Saturday live on the station. But if you want to hear the Youngster and old man get worked up about the Cleveland Browns draft, you need to tune in. Find us on Twitter, TroyRobert967, at KidCunny. Take it away, Youngster.
Yeah, like you said, at Youngster Old Man, all one word on Twitter. Again, at Youngster Old Man. We know how many people listen to the show. It's over the 1,000 mark every single week. If you like football talk, if you like draft talk, just for, if you want to follow us just to get the link as to where to listen or to download the podcast or to just listen to the podcast, you don't even have to spend time downloading it. Just at Youngster Old Man on Twitter. And then if you want to unfollow us because you think we're idiots, perfectly fine by me. But again, we've got a Cleveland-based show that we do. We've got a Pittsburgh-based show that we do. We're going, through the draft today with the Big Ten. We're going through the draft with Cleveland. We're going through the draft with Pittsburgh. We did a general show a week ago for a couple different stations, so we're all over the place, realistically. But so this week, basically going to all be recapping the draft. And Barkley went number 2. I just wanted to mention, too, last thing with the Giants before we move on to Ward from Ohio State going to the Browns. One thing I want to mention with the Giants, they picked up Nate Solder, and that's the Patriots left tackle for the last few years. So that's, great ad. Obviously, you have to pay him, so, it's not as though you're getting him for free. But you added a legitimate left tackle. I don't think he's phenomenal, unbelievable, all-pro automatically. But I think you got yourself a starting left tackle, which is great. That's a great start. In the second round, pick number 2, 34 overall, you get one of the top guards in the draft. I think that was perfect, realistically. I don't know personally what the Giants' right tackle situation is. Maybe you're moving your former left tackle to right tackle. I don't know. But you picked up one of the better left tackles in the game from the Patriots over the offseason. Now you draft a young, obviously, good guard to go at the top of round 2, basically. So they're addressing their need that way, to draft Barkley and then to draft a guard, to pick up a good left tackle. I can't hate what the Giants are doing. It's just, I don't know. I guess if you're all in on Davis Webb and he's going to be at least competent for you post Eli Manning, whenever that is, then that's cool, I guess, because you're adding a back who, barring injury, again, should be your guy for the next 10 years. I truly believe the way that running backs last longer nowadays, the way that Barkley takes care of his body, I think he's all in to last 10 years, and most running backs, you can't say that. because they get to the league 21, 22 years old. Once you hit 30, it's like automatic downhill, roller coaster for most running backs, basically every running back outside of your Frank Gores. I can't even think of another guy who's been really good past 30. But so it's rare. If there's one guy who I think can do it, it would be Barkley. So I can't hate on the pick. Barkley was obviously phenomenal in college, but one thing to note with Barkley, and I don't have his college stats up, but they're pretty underwhelming in terms of rushing yards and yards per carry. This past year, there were a handful of games, I think it was 4, where he didn't even average like 4 yards a carry. There were a couple more where he didn't even average 3. There were like half his games this past year where he didn't even average 100 or get to 100 rushing yards. It's interesting because there are people out there that say, is he the next Christian McCaffrey, where, yeah, he's a good running back between the tackles. He's obviously strong, but he's a great route runner, and he's great on third down. He can protect your quarterback as far as pass blocking goes against blitzes.
I'll throw this out there, youngster. You bring up those stats, and that's fine.
Yeah.
I love the pick, too. And so where I was going with that, though, is everybody that is just saying this is a sure thing. I understand that, the talent. But when you look at those numbers in the stats, youngster, you have to remember, when you played Penn State last year, what was going to be your main priority? Shut down Barkley. So take your chances, see what they can do in the passing game, see if they'll beat you that way, which, they can. But I look at some of those games, and it's tough to run with 8 in the box, 9 in the box. And you're basically taunting Penn State, you're going to have to beat us with your passing game. And that's fine. So when those people that will just look at stats and say, well, he's not as good as so-and-so because he didn't have his, yards per carry or this or that. Watch the game film. Watch the game film, because the other teams, to shut him down, had to bring more people in the box, and Penn State had to then adjust. And when you look at when it was straight-up defense, Barkley's one heck of a running back. Like you said, he takes care of his body. He's thick. He's elusive. The guy, yeah. When you're looking in a perfect world with no injuries and everything that is supposed to just go as planned, Barkley should be an all-pro. Barkley should be a Hall of Famer. But you never know what's going to come in the NFL. But I just wanted to, because the stat thing has come up. And I have not been in conversation with anybody, but you just kind of jolted my memory that I've seen it and I've heard it come up about the stats. Well, there's two sides to the coin. I don't know what running back can really have a lot of success when you got 8 in the box. Sometimes 9. Go back and look at the game film. And, is that why Penn State's passing game was better at times? Sure. A lot of one-on-one coverage. You're putting more guys in the box to stop Barkley. So I just wanted to throw that out with the stats. You can't always look at stats and say, well, just look at the stats. No, you can't do that with Barkley, because in college, if you play straight-up defense, he would have rushed for 300 yards a game, Kevin. He really would have.
No, yeah, I hear you. It's something I brought up to bring up because it is out there. It's floating out there. If there was one knock whatsoever, that's what it was. It's like he wasn't insanely productive on the ground a year ago. And I completely agree with that. But at the same time, this is still a top 10 offense in college football. I think they put up 41 points a game. They were still great. And Trace McSorley, really good college quarterback. He had Mike Gesicki as a tight end. He was drafted, I think, in the second round. Deshaun Hamilton was Penn State's all-time leading receptions guy by the time he graduated, which was this past year. I think he went in the third round, I believe, to Denver. So this team was loaded offensively, and still everyone decided to gang up on Saquon. But, still, even with that, even with him not being incredibly productive on the ground, so to say, he did, really well through the air, I guess, if you want to, talk about receptions and run after the catch or whatever. But in general, this offense was really good. And, this offense did what they needed to do, even with Saquon Barkley not being exceptionally productive on the ground this past year. He was a couple years ago, but I think everyone realized this guy's insane. So, we need to key on him, even though Penn State has a second-round tight end, a third-round wide receiver, who knows what in the NFL for a quarterback, but regardless, even if he goes undrafted, he's very productive as a college quarterback, Trace McSorley. So you're right. You had to pick your poison. You can't just look at stats. Otherwise, look at every single Oklahoma quarterback, look at every single Hawaii quarterback, look at every single Texas Tech quarterback. They'd go number 1, number 2, number 3 overall every year because of the numbers they put up in their system. To move on from Barkley, unless you've got anything else, Troy, number 4 overall, and we're 15 minutes on the show now since we started, and we always talk about.
That's what I told you. Don't put a time limit on this bad boy.
Yeah,
we're not gonna spend 15 minutes on every pick.
Right.
All 30. What was it? 33? You said.
33.
30.
Yep.
Yeah, we'd be here. We'd literally be here for days if we did that. But I know where you're moving on, and I'm just, while you do this, I'm actually going to put the phone on mute, and I'm going to get something to drink because I'm going to get worked up at some point during this little part of the show.
I want to, before I get to Denzel Ward, and I'm not going to trick you, Troy, and ask you a question ASAP in the middle of your drink there. But I wanted to bring this up before we get to any other pick. Big Ten had, like you said, Troy, 33 selections in this draft. There were 256 picks. You want to do the math super quickly and divide it out by conferences, feel free. I'm not going to. But in short, the Big Ten had the third most amount of selections with 33. I know the SEC had the most. I don't even know who had the second most. SEC almost always has the most guys picked. And so if that's what the SEC wants to hold its bread and butter to, that's fine. That's where most of the top recruits come from high school, is in SEC country. So it's no surprise that SEC schools get that. Just like in hockey, if you get the top recruits in the Northeast or the Midwest and the top teams, 3 of the top 4 teams in the Frozen Four this year were Big Ten teams, you're more likely to have more talent in the Midwest, Northeastern part of the country when it comes to hockey. It's not that way for football. We're talking about football. SEC reigns supreme in terms of championships over the last, 10, 15, whatever years. Talking about NFL prospects, that's because that's where most of the prospects come from. So it's hard for Ohio State to pull a kid from Georgia when Georgia's got a top 5 program. And it's hard for Michigan to pull a top guy from the state of Alabama when Alabama's a dynasty. It's just hard to do. That's just where the prospects come from. I'm not going to get into all that, but to give the numbers, the Big Ten had 33 selections. It was the third most behind the SEC and some other conference. Not that it really matters, but just something I wanted to mention. Does that mean anything to you, Troy? To me, I don't know. It's kind of what I expect. I expect the SEC to lead in draft picks. And when it comes to number 2, if the Big Ten's there certain years, I expect it. If they're third certain years, like this past year, that's, it's what I expect, I guess. There's no other real comment I have, I guess, on it.
I guess like my new crazy comment that I whipped out a few shows ago is whoop-de-doo! I don't care. I really don't care how many players from your conference were selected in the NFL.
Right.
I really don't. Because the NFL draft, and correct me if I'm wrong, these teams do extensive research to look for players that are going to fit what they want on their team. So that doesn't, to me, I don't care what conference you played in. They're looking for players that are going to fit. So you could have, tight end position. I'll just use that. I don't know why I picked the tight end position. But you have your draft board. You have your top 4, and then you want a tight end. Well, the top 3 are gone, and now you're looking at number 4. I could care less what conference it comes from. I don't care. People want to say, well, we had this many players. Who cares? I really don't care. That doesn't make you a better conference based on the number of players you had drafted. If you go back to the beginning of the show, I said the Big Ten had some quality players drafted, shows the quality depth in the conference, which that's what it does. You have good players in that conference. There's some players drafted, you scratch your head and say, ooh. There's players that were undrafted, like, ooh, well, he was projected to be a 6th or 7th rounder. He didn't get drafted. That's because every team, they have something specific they're looking for at certain positions. And so at that point, it's coming down to what is that player's skill set? And I don't think they're looking, oh, this guy played at Alabama, got to draft him. Just so happens that this talented athlete is playing at Alabama. I really don't think that any NFL scout cares what school they played at. Now, the success helps. Don't get me wrong. We've talked about this. There's some great college quarterbacks out there that have flopped in the NFL, that have just flat out flopped in the NFL because they were a product of their college system. And that's what the pros are trying to figure out. Is his talent going to match the NFL and what we're looking for? And so, to be honest, Kevin, I think sometimes the college they go to could be a detriment to the guy's skill set. Because if he's putting up gaudy numbers against lesser opponents and he's playing on a team that has a ton of superstars and things are a lot easier, maybe they get overlooked a little bit. Maybe they fall on some teams' draft boards because they're taking that into consideration. So, back to the simple answer of your question. Whoop-de-doo-hoo, I don't care.
What else I don't care about, and you know what's funny to your point, I guess, before I get to mine, is that certain scouts do care. Like certain scouts will say, and fans absolutely, it's like, hey, we got that safety from Alabama. Okay. So, like you said, how does he fit in our system? I don't care if he came from Delaware State. I don't care if he came from Delaware. That's Joe Flacco. He's doing just fine. Tony Romo, what college did he go to? Nobody knows. What conference? Nobody knows. I think he did just fine. I think Big Ben did just fine in the MAC. I believe that's where Miami of Ohio competes in, is the MAC. He didn't have phenomenal success. It doesn't matter where you come from, and quarterbacks especially. It's like, oh, he went against SEC competition every single game. It's like, who cares? You go against Big Ten competition every game. Who cares? Another thing I wanted to mention, too, kind of like, hey, look, the SEC led in draft selections, and this is not, hey, we're a Big Ten show, let's bash on the SEC. That stat doesn't matter. I'll throw a stat out there to bash the Big Ten. For people that think this matters, to me it means absolutely nothing. But bowl records every year. It's like, ooh, which conference had the best bowl season? Big Ten this past year, 7-1. SEC was 5-6. Now, Big Ten fans will say, "Oh, gee, we went 7-1. SEC went 5-6. You won a national championship, but Big Ten won almost every single bowl game." So, who cares? There are certain quarterbacks. I think it was Jared Goff who skipped his bowl game, I believe, a couple of years ago. Josh Rosen, I know, skipped his bowl game this past year. But who cares? I mean, it's an exhibition. It's extra practice time for coaches to see your young guys. It's, you know, to celebrate the seniors. It's not a game that means anything in terms of wins, losses, and I mean, if a coach
it does to the suit sitting in the building in the center of campus because it's buku dollar coming to their school. That's who it matters to, Kevin. To you and I, we made fun of the bowl. There's way too many of them. Way too many bowl games. But every time you go to a bowl game, it's greenbacks coming to the university. So those guys in suits and gals, I got to say that, and gals, a lot of gals in powers or positions of power at universities, they're looking at their balance sheet saying, oh, our football team just went to a bowl game. Woo-hoo! There we go. The greenbacks are coming in. That's what bowl games mean to me right now, Kevin.
Yeah, and that's what they mean to every university from, you know, especially a monetary standpoint. Football coaches, to win it, to lose it, it's like, unless you're in the college football playoff, I could not care less that Ohio State won their bowl game this past year. It was a failure of a season because they didn't get to the college football playoff. That's how I look at it. I do not care whatsoever that they crushed USC. It was cool to see, but does it mean anything? Absolutely not. That's how I see it. To keep with Ohio State, to finally move back to the draft, number 4 overall, Cleveland Browns. Nobody thought this was happening. Take the number 1 cornerback according to most. In Ohio State's Denzel Ward, he's like a 5'10", 5'11" at best corner. Very good. A very good man-to-man guy. To me, he was the top corner in the draft. As an Ohio State fan, I was absolutely a fan of this guy. But to go number 4, a lot of people have already talked about it. Bradley Chubb, how do you pass that up if you're the Cleveland Browns? The Denver Broncos were looking to trade back from number 5. If Chubb did not fall, then they were going to trade that pick. Hey, look, Chubb fell because Ward went number 4. So Denver stuck with the number 5 pick and said, we're not trading it. We're taking Bradley Chubb to put opposite Von Miller. The Browns could have done the same thing with Chubb, put opposite of Myles Garrett, who had a really good year a year ago, even though he missed a few games. That, to me, would have been the smart pick. Not to bash Denzel Ward whatsoever, but if you can have 2 elite pass rushers as opposed to an elite pass rusher and hopefully he turns into a number 1 shutdown corner, give me the 2 elite pass rushers. That's how you're able to beat 18-0 teams like the Patriots. When you can get to Tom Brady, doesn't matter that you have Randy Moss and this high-scoring number 1 offense of all time. If Brady's uncomfortable, he's not going to succeed.
And he had no time to throw in that Super Bowl. None whatsoever.
Right.
Why? Because the Giants got to the quarterback.
Yep.
You see, you're getting me all worked up again because we talked about this off the air. I'm okay with the pick. I like the pick. Actually, no, we did it on our show last week, and then I'm losing my mind. So you got me so worked up. I mean, the pick itself and Ward himself, it's a great addition, but not at number 4. Not
right.
at number 4 when Chubb is sitting there. What are you thinking, Cleveland? What are you thinking? You have Garrett, who's only going to get better. And in the short sample size of last year, because he started the season hurt, turned in a decent year. Not a great year, probably not even worthy of the number 1 pick, but he's going to get better. Again, he started the year hurt. Yeah. And now Denver's over there licking their chops with Von Miller and Chubb on the other side. Now, again, nothing's guaranteed, but everything I've seen Chubb, my God, this guy can play.
Yeah.
But what do? If you're going to say, well, let's see what this rookie has, and you're going to just, man on man, 1 blocker, I think he's going to beat half of the people he plays against.
Yeah.
So then what do? You're going to double Chubb and leave Von Miller 1-on-1? Or are you going to double them both, and then whoever's playing in the middle, man, they're going to be sitting there with eyes wide open going, here I come. I just don't get it. Because if you can have a dominant pass rush, you don't need a shutdown corner, youngster. It's great to have one. It is great. But you don't need one if you're getting consistent pressure on the quarterback. So back to your Super Bowl question. Giants secondary. Who stands out in that secondary? They had good ones. They didn't have terrible ones.
It was going to be my question to you, Troy, was who were those corners? I don't even know. I don't remember.
Neither do I. No idea. That's how good they were. Because it wasn't about, what do you remember? I mean, you definitely, you look at that game, but you look at the pass rush.
Right.
Like you and I have talked many times about every Super Bowl. There's one thing you remember when you go through all the Super Bowls. We did it on one of our shows.
Yep.
And when you talk about that Super Bowl, and you think back and go, okay, recap that Super Bowl in 5 seconds. Constant pressure by the Giants. That's why they won. They won because they were constantly in Brady's face, putting him on his back. Even when he threw it, he was getting hit. He was getting pressure. You don't need great cornerbacks, and that's why I get worked up about the Browns taking this pick.
Right.
It has nothing to do against Ward. Good for you. You got drafted number 4, but I don't think it was the right pick. Many experts had him going basically maybe in the top 10, but like 9 or 10. A lot of mock drafts had him like 14 or 15. So what were the Browns thinking? I'm done because I could keep repeating myself. Turning it back over to you, youngster.
Yeah, now that we're 28 minutes in, we're 2 picks in. I have no other crazy big, topics to go over like, hey, Big Ten had, 3rd most selections. What does that mean to you? Not going to do that. I'm not going to run through every single pick from this, point on. Obviously, we've got 31 others. Like I mentioned, we're almost 30 minutes into the show already, but some that I wanted to mention, and I'll finish the first round, obviously, but Ohio State's Billy Price, he was a phenomenal center, and the one thing I wanted to mention he went number 21 to the Bengals. I'm not going to dissect the Bengals' offensive line play, but as a whole, I wanted to mention there were 6, I think, offensive linemen taken in the first round of this year's draft, which is the most since I don't know what it was, like 10 years ago or something. But I think people hopefully are starting to realize that, and, maybe it's just this year was a great offensive line class. I don't know. But as a whole, it's like, if you got a franchise quarterback, protect him. If you don't have a franchise quarterback, trade up and get one. If you have a franchise quarterback and your offensive line's okay, you want to get to the other team's quarterback. So draft Bradley Chubb. So draft Myles Garrett number 1. So draft any great pass rusher. Basically, get your quarterback, protect him, get to the other team's quarterback. If you do if you have all of that, you're going to be a phenomenal team. Because who does that really well? Philly did that really well last year. Who else had a great quarterback, had really good offensive line play, and had a really good defensive line / outside linebackers blitzing? I can't think of any team outside of Philadelphia that had all three of that. And who won the Super Bowl? I mean, I don't know. Pittsburgh was good at certain times in certain areas. New England was good in certain times in certain areas. Obviously, quarterback, sure. But in general, all three of those, if you've got all three of that, I don't care what your linebacker is.
You mentioned Pittsburgh. We do a Pittsburgh show, so I'll interrupt you here. Great offensive line, franchise quarterback. They struggled with getting consistent pressure on the quarterback.
Right.
And thus, we also had this debate on that show. Everybody sits there and complains about Pittsburgh's secondary. Oh, they're terrible, they're terrible, they're terrible. Well, if you get some darn pressure on a quarterback, they'll be better. And when they got pressure, if you go back, and again, living in Western PA, I watch every Steeler game, unless, of course, the Packers are playing at the same time. But when you watch the Steeler games, they had success defensively when they found pressure. And there were times in the middle of that season, last year, when they could get consistent pressure on the quarterback, and that's when you, and Shazier was healthy, you actually called them the best team in the NFL, and I didn't disagree with you.
Yeah.
Because they were getting consistent pressure on the quarterback. And did we hear about how bad the cornerback play was? No.
Nope.
We didn't hear about bad cornerback play in Pittsburgh until they lost in the playoffs. Why? Because they couldn't get pressure on the quarterback. So it goes down to it. Whenever somebody tells me your cornerbacks are terrible, okay, here's how I'll say a team's cornerbacks are terrible. Now we're like totally off the topic of what we're doing on this show. But you know what? I don't care. It's our show. So a team gets pressure on the quarterback, and then your cornerbacks can't intercept the ball or can't tackle, then they're bad. But when you're getting pressure on the quarterback, they only have to cover for 3 or 4 seconds. Not even 4. 4 would be pushing it, because if you're getting pressure, it's usually quicker than 4 seconds.
Yeah.
And it's nearly impossible to stop the slant route. I mean, even if you're a great cornerback, if you're taking a 3-step drop and firing the ball, that is hard to defend. I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
But if you're getting pressure on a quarterback, your secondary is going to get better. Thus, back to my comment in the beginning of when I did my first rant, you don't always need to have a shutdown corner. It's great. It's a great luxury. But you don't need to have one to win. Who is the Eagles' shutdown corner, Kevin?
Good question.
I can't name one cornerback on the Eagles. Can't. And I follow the NFL. None of them stand out. That's because their front seven was good. The front seven was good. So I'm not saying you can just have, crappy cornerback play. But you got to address your front seven if you want to have success in this league, a.k.a. the team I follow, the Green Bay Packers. Yeah, they got Aaron Rodgers. Everybody thought, oh, great, Packers are great. They have Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, they're great. But their defense is terrible. I don't use this word often. It sucks. They couldn't get pressure if the gate was wide open. I mean, that's how bad it was. So it doesn't matter if Hundley was the quarterback or Rodgers is the quarterback. That defense was terrible because they couldn't generate pressure on the quarterback. So I'm going to turn it back over to you now, youngster. My voice is getting hoarse.
34 minutes into the show, 3 picks. We'll move to the 4th. I think after the first round, this show will go a lot quicker. But number 24 overall, Maryland, DJ Moore, number 1 receiver taken. Maryland receiver. And we talked about, I remember, them going to their 4th-string quarterback last year. And at one point, I think they had a 5th that they went to. So for DJ Moore to stand out with 4 or 5 different quarterbacks being played at Maryland last year, I mean, we talked about it. This Maryland team was not bad last year. Their quarterback, just no matter who came in, their year was done due to injury. It was terrible. But Maryland had some talent, and this was one of the talented guys, obviously. Big Ten Receiver of the Year. He won that award for a reason. Number 24 overall, the Panthers. To me, cornerbacks, wide receivers, somewhat of the same mold. I guess I'd rather have a really good corner than a really good wideout because I don't think really good wide receiver play equates to being a great team. I think OBJ doing great things means nothing for the Giants. There's some stat out there with him that when he has his most productive games, they actually lose more. And I remember a couple of years ago when Atlanta had a top 10 offense of all time in terms of scoring and yardage. It was actually when Julio Jones had like 40 receiving yards or less in games. That's when Atlanta won like every single game they played. When he had 100-plus yards receiving, that's when they lost games. Not to say that the two correlate exactly perfectly together, but
close.
That's how much
it's close, though, youngster, because when you're getting a lot of yards receiving, I know a lot of teams use the pass to set up the run, but when you're putting up gaudy numbers, it's usually because you're behind. I understand that people will argue with me about this and say, well, no, that's not necessarily true, and it's not. But a lot of teams use the pass to set up the run. Again, being a Packer fan, the Packers use the pass to set up the run.
Sure.
That's what they do. But when you're slinging the ball 40 times a game, it's usually because you're behind. Not a lot of teams are winging it 40 times when they have a 2-touchdown lead. That's not the way the NFL works. College is different. College is different.
Right.
Teams will run up scores. But in the NFL, if your quarterback has thrown the ball 40 times, it means you were in a dogfight or you had to come from behind to win. So typically, and I haven't done the research, and maybe you can add this in there, and I'll turn it back over to you. When you look at quarterback stats, if a quarterback throws it like 20 to 25 times and your team wins, it probably means they were controlling the clock. They were running the ball, controlling the clock. Defense was doing their thing. When you're throwing it 40 times, you're probably coming from behind. That's all I got.
Yeah, makes perfect sense to me. That's a lot of things in sports seem like common sense. If you just talk it out, seriously, even to yourself. I mean, if you're just talking about your favorite team and it's like, why were we bad last year? Let me assess my team in my own room, whether you think it or talk it out loud. If you talk it out loud, it's even more effective, I think. That's why people tell you to, talk. Well, at least journalism major. I write about sports for a living, basically. That's how I make the majority of my income. If I talk out loud myself, before I publish an article, if I literally just read it to myself out loud, that's when you notice the most mistakes. And it's the same thing in life. If you're talking out a major decision, hey, should I move to Chicago or should I stay in St. Louis? Just completely random example. And you just talk out the pros and cons, you'll almost always come out to your decision and what sounds best. Realize what, works best for you regardless. Yes, your point makes sense to me. It's almost like common sense to me. Moving on to round 2, now is when, I'm not going to, I don't think, unless you want to, Troy, mention all 33 players that were drafted, but in round 2, Iowa, I believe it was a guard, might be a tackle.
No, I think after round 2, we can just kind of throw out some, final thoughts on here. I just, go over some things because after that, I mean, like I said, we'd be here for hours, days.
Yeah.
Every player is deserving to have their 15 minutes of fame on, go big or go home. Sure. However, we do want to keep our listeners engaged and don't want them falling asleep. So Take it away again.
Nobody, even my mom, if she likes sports like that, I'll say my dad. My dad likes sports. Even my father would not listen to this show for 5 hours. So he loves me. He loves sports. He wouldn't listen to the show for 5 hours.
I probably wouldn't listen to it while I'm editing it for 5 hours.
Right.
I would probably just hit delete after about an hour and a half. Be like, all righty, time to end this now. Okay, no more interrupting. Go ahead.
Okay. Iowa, offensive lineman James Daniels, number 39 overall, the Bears. I think that's smart in the sense, this guy could completely bust, or he could be a future Hall of Famer. I think it's smart to draft an offensive lineman if you're the Bears because you drafted Mitch Trubisky a year ago. You can't have too many good offensive linemen if you just drafted your franchise quarterback a year ago. There's no team out there that drafts their franchise quarterback for the future and their offensive line is completely set. I mean, typically it goes hand in hand. If you've got a bad record and you're drafting your franchise quarterback, your offensive line is not fantastic across the board.
Ask Mr. Luck how long it takes. Ask Mr. Luck about good offensive lines. He's finally drooling because they got one of the best linemen in the draft. So you're absolutely right. Like you said, the Giants took a lineman in with their first pick in round 2. Offensive linemen, good ones, deserve to be picked high. That once was not the case. But you see more and more offensive linemen getting drafted in the first 3 rounds that become staples of offensive lines because it's so important to protect that franchise quarterback, protect millions upon millions of dollars, and in the Green Bay Packers case, protect the playoff berth. Because outside of Aaron Rodgers, you're going, next year I guess you're going to Deshaun Kaiser. There we go. I can't wait for that. That's wonderful. But I'm done. I'm getting frustrated.
Yeah, my favorite team in the NFL, Tennessee Titans, it's like they were porous for year after year after year, and then they started getting average. And it's like, oh, gee, how'd that happen? Well, they drafted an offensive lineman in the top 10 one year. They drafted an offensive lineman in the top 10 the next year. They traded up to draft an offensive lineman, at least in the top 15. It might have been top 10. The right tackle for Michigan State, Jack Conklin, the next year. And suddenly, boom, you've got a good offensive line. Well, if you're willing to spend number 1 draft picks year after year after year on your offensive line, and one of them busted. Chance Warmack, the guard, that went, it was number 6 or number 7 overall, he busted. He's on another team. He's on his, 3rd team already. And they still, Tennessee Titans offensive line, a top 10 unit in the league the last 2 years. Yes, you bring in free agents, but if you want consistent success, and the Titans have been pretty good the last 2 years, not great, but pretty good, and Marcus Mariota missing, 5-6 games over the last 2 years because he always misses games. I'm not going to get into that, but if you've got good quarterback play, you've got a good offensive line, your running game's going to benefit, your defense is going to benefit. It's hard for your team to be bad if you've got good quarterback play, good offensive line play. I'll move on. Number 42 overall, so early in the second round, Penn State, Mike Gesicki. This was my personal favorite, best tight end in the draft. A lot of people like the 25-year-old guy who didn't have great, necessarily wasn't a phenomenal receiver as a tight end. 25-year-old guy from South Carolina who went in the first round. A lot of people liked him. If you're a first-round tight end, you better be able to catch the ball at an elite level. That's my take on it. I feel like you can find a lot of blocking tight ends after the first round. That's just my opinion. Mike Gesicki, to me, is the complete package. He does everything really well. And I don't know. I expected him to go in the first round, toward the end of the first round, and went number 42 overall to the Dolphins. I don't know how much success he's going to have on the Dolphins. It depends on quarterback play. There's no tight end out there that makes their quarterback look phenomenal. But Gesicki, to me, was the top tight end. I don't know if you've got anything on him, Troy, but I know the next guy that I mentioned you will have something on. And then it's there's a couple
you can just keep going. I mean, I was going to wait till you get done and then just, give you my quick thoughts on these guys without interrupting. So just continue, youngster.
I'll skip the next pick, but I'll finish out round 2. You'll understand why, Troy, and I'm sure you may already know. But number 52, Rutgers, a linebacker, Kamoko Turi to the Colts. Colts need everything. So congrats to that pick. Number 64, end of the second round, was Tyquan Lewis to the Cleveland Browns, Ohio State D end. I think it's cool that the Browns got potentially another good pass rusher. A lot of people would have preferred Chubb over Tyquan Lewis, but regardless, Tyquan Lewis was a good player, and it'll be interesting to see what he does with the Browns. If he turns into an all-pro level player, you can kind of sit back and laugh, and especially if Denzel Ward becomes a number one corner for you. But on passing Chubb, but I don't know. To me, it's interesting. Will be very interesting to see what happens. Whether you're a Browns fan or not, I'm certainly
well,
not.
After the second round, I wanted to tell the Cleveland Browns that there's more schools than Ohio State. There's other schools out there that they can draft players from. They don't have to draft players from the same college in the state that they play.
Yeah.
They can go and they can draft from other schools. I didn't know if they knew that after the first two rounds.
Yeah, it's a great school, though, Troy. Wow.
It is. It's a great school. Anyway. Don't get me wrong.
I know. I'm kidding. I wanted to go back not the last pick on the second round, but I skipped this pick. Number 45 overall, Green Bay Packers, Iowa cornerback Josh Jackson led the country in interceptions. That's a stat that, it kind of goes up and down depending on, who just gets the most opportunity. Right. But I loved the Packers draft altogether, and part of it is drafting a corner in your first round with your first-round pick. And first of all, they also added the Saints' first-round pick for next year, which is phenomenal. But you picked up a corner in round one. You picked up a corner in round two who's had elite production a year ago. I like Josh Jackson. I don't know enough about Jair Alexander from Louisville to say that he's going to be phenomenal. But if you want to address the cornerback position, which I know means only so much to you, Troy, but I thought that they probably had a hole in the secondary, and hopefully with one of these two guys, if not both.
Oh yeah, they got a hole in the secondary. They'll let everybody go, and then they're signing washed up Devon House and Tremont Edwards. I mean, that was the great off season there. Awesome. But do you have the Packers draft in front of you, Kevin? They have needs. There's a reason I'm doing this. Pull it up and let me know when they address the pass rushing hole that they have. That's what I want to figure out. And when we figure that out, then I'll tell you how good these cornerbacks are going to be. Because they're going to go back to what I said 45 minutes ago.
Right. I don't know what Oren Burks, the linebacker from Vanderbilt they picked in the third round, I don't know if he's an inside linebacker, solely inside. I don't know if he's a pass-rushing outside linebacker. I'm not sure. Regardless, if you want to talk about defensive linemen, you have to go to round 7 for Green Bay. James Looney from California, round 7, to talk about pass rushers.
And they had such a dominant pass rush last year. Yes, I'm being sarcastic. So, again, I'm okay with both these picks. My problem is, okay, you mentioned it. Jackson, most interceptions in the United States. Whoop-de-doo-hoo. He also played on a very good team that got we talked about getting pressure on a quarterback, and we talk about interceptions in college. The college quarterback play is so different than the NFL.
Yeah.
I mean, quarterbacks are not as precise. They're not as accurate. Heck, Josh Allen, what's his completion percentage? 57%?
Yep.
Okay. Woohoo. So, to me, interceptions in college don't mean crap. How is it going to relate to the NFL game? Because, yeah, interceptions are great, but if you're going to be a cornerback that all you do is intercept the ball and you let your guy, the stat that I like to really look at for a cornerback is thrown to, catches. So your guy was thrown to 10 times and he only had 4 catches. That's a pretty good day. Guy was thrown to 10 times, he got 8 catches. That's not a good day. So, I mean, the world of the NFL has changed a little bit, but it comes with these complex offenses. And, like we talked about, you're going to play bump and run. You're going to play man. You're going to play zone. You're going to play cover 2. What are you going to play? But at the end of the day, it comes down to what is your front 7 going to do? And if there's no pressure on the quarterback in Green Bay, again, I don't care who you draft. They're not going to be successful. So, again, Kevin, I like the picks. I'm trying to figure out where the pass rush is coming from next year. Because you can't go all in on Clay Matthews. I don't think he's played 16 games in any one of his seasons. He's either got a thumb injury, a hand injury, a growing injury, a hamstring injury. The list goes on. The guy always misses games. They have no inside linebacker play. Their front is okay, but you got a guy named Daniels. Okay, double team Daniels. Then nobody else stepped up last year. So I'm not getting overly excited about these guys because I need to see them play. But if the Packers can't get a pass rush, these guys are going to be on an island and they're going to get eaten alive. That's how I feel about the picks, Kevin, for the Packers anyway. But I like the pick, though.
Yep.
I like the guy.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good pick. The problem is the Packers have no pass rush. So
yeah,
part of me feels a little bad for these guys.
Yeah. No, yeah, it makes sense. If you're a corner and you have 6 seconds to defend guys as opposed to 3, doesn't matter talent-wise, you can mask a lot if you're having to cover an NFL wide receiver for half the time as someone else. So no matter who you are, I'll move on to round 3. Ohio State, this is one guy I want to mention. Ohio State, Jerome Baker, inside linebacker for the Dolphins. I liked what the Dolphins did round 2 with Gesicki. I like what they did round 3 with Baker. I love Baker, personally. I know he didn't have necessarily the greatest year last year as opposed to 2 years ago. But personally, as an Ohio State fan, he was the guy that I loved throughout his time as a Buckeye. So I thought that was a pretty good pick in round 3. Sam Hubbard, also round 3 to the Bengals. Another pass rusher from Ohio State. I like him a lot. I personally like him more than Tyquan Lewis, who went at the end of the second round to the Browns. But regardless, another couple Ohio State guys. Michigan's Mason Cole, offensive lineman, to Arizona. Arizona, I thought, did pretty well, getting potentially your franchise quarterback in this draft in Rosen at 10. And then Christian Kirk, who may be the best wide receiver of them all in the second round. And then you add an offensive lineman in the third round. I like what Arizona did a lot in this draft. Those are the first 3 rounds. As far as any other, I'm just going to scroll literally and see if there's any other names. There were 2 that I did. I actually talked about the NFL to a Canadian radio station. You know this, I think, Troy. Montreal's top radio station, sports station. They have me on during the NFL season after the NFL draft. Talked about steals in this draft, and I went with a couple Big Ten guys, of course. Round 4, Iowa, Josie Jewell. He was a phenomenal, seemed like had 15 tackles a game at Iowa a year ago. Picked in round 4 by Denver. I thought that was phenomenal. You're getting solid production in terms of tackling and being a tackling machine. I thought Denver did really well there with the Iowa linebacker. Another guy, I'm just scrolling through here, Wisconsin, Nick Nelson to the Raiders. I don't know if you want to comment on any of these guys, Troy. Stop me if you do. But, here's another one, too. Broncos taking Deshaun Hamilton. I mentioned Penn State's all-time leading receiver. In the 4th round, I thought that was great value. Last guy I wanted to mention, round 5, Michigan's Maurice Hurst. I don't have anything past this. So this is my last talking point. But Michigan's Maurice Hurst, Oakland Raiders, number 140 overall, round 5 he lasted. A lot of people thought he was a first-round talent. And if not in the first round, then early second round. Why he fell to round 5 was not personality issues. It was health. And it was before I want to make sure I get this right, before the NFL Combine. He had tests done, and he ended up not competing in the Combine because doctors said that there was something wrong with his heart. Obviously, that's something serious to consider. So half before, I think it was the day of the draft, someone like Adam Schefter or, some NFL Network draft analyst, whatever, said half the teams in the league just scratched off Maurice Hurst's name off their draft board because they said too many medical issues. We don't want to mess around with this, basically. First-round talent, potentially. We don't want to mess around with it. That's why it lasted till round 5. But he also competed in Michigan's Pro Day, which was after the NFL Combine, because doctors said he was fine. So I don't know. Some doctors say he has a heart issue. Some say he's perfectly fine. And he competed in Michigan's Pro Day after the Combine. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I have no idea what Maurice Hurst's heart is like. But if he is able to play, first-round talent going in round 5, obviously a steal if you're Oakland if he's able to play. Again, Troy, I've got nothing else, but I'm curious on your situation or your thought on that situation in terms of health and that kind of scare, because it's not like a personality issue where, hey, this guy's done cocaine. We think he's got a pretty decent chance of busting out of the league because of personality stuff and just lifelong decisions and potentially being arrested. That's not the case here. It's health, and it's with his heart. It's not even like oh my God, he tore his ACL twice in college, so we're worried about him staying healthy. This is, can he play football and be a human being, or are doctors going to say week 2 of his rookie year, yeah, you shouldn't play football, period. And so he just...
Chance you take with any draft pick.
Yeah.
Any of these players drafted could go step in a workout gym today and blow out their knee and be done. They could get hurt. They could be walking down the street and, rip up something. It's all at risk, right? I mean, I can understand why he fell. I mean, that's a huge risk. But I'll tell you, it's funny you brought his name up. You asked if I wanted to make any comments. Had you not mentioned him, he was a player I was going to mention. I mean, phenomenal talent. But can his heart physically take what the NFL means? We don't know. We don't know. But if it can, what a steal. The guy can play. The guy can play football. See if he can physically play football now. I mean, people that listen to the show know Kevin and I, we can be sympathetic and empathetic. We are nice people, even though the old man gets worked up. At the end of the day, it's about a human being and his life. And I know he loves football, but I'm sure that if there is any concern about him living a healthy life, that he probably won't play football. So
right.
Am I going to sit there and bash all these teams for taking him off the board? No, because you don't know. It's a risk. But, to take him completely off the board, it's kind of scratched my head like, well, once you get down, there's no guarantee. I know you don't want to waste a number 1 pick on a guy that maybe can play. But,
sure.
Where he got drafted,
yeah,
why not take the chance?
Right.
After the 3rd round, I mean, heck, even second-rounders, even first-rounders aren't guaranteed anything. Yeah, they're going to sign their contract. Doesn't mean that they're going to be a contributor.
A third of basically every draft class, a third of the first-round picks, take whatever draft class you want, almost a third of them bust out of the league completely.
Exactly.
Let alone just be an average starter. A third of them do nothing.
So, where he was drafted, why not take that risk? Because this guy's a heck of a player when he can play. And so we'll see if he's able to play 100% in the NFL. If he can, great. What a great storyline, though. I'm going to follow him. This is a Go Big show or a Big Ten show. But, no, I like this guy. And I hope he gets to play. I want to see him play on Sundays. Yeah. The other guy I want to talk about, of course, I got to be a Wisconsin homer, Fumagalli. What a great situation to go to Denver. I think he'd be a good fit. I think he's going to be a good fit there. I like him. I mean, he was the go-to guy in Wisconsin because, was the way that Wisconsin played, you always had to have that security blanket. This is a guy that can play football. He is an old-school football player. I think where he got drafted is probably right. I mean, he is not your superstar tight end, but, man, Denver got a football player. They got one heck of a football player, and I don't think you're going to disagree with me, youngster. In the NFL, when you're a football player, and it doesn't matter who we're talking about, if you're a football player, you're going to be a good one. If you are a true football player, doesn't matter what position. If you're a football player, and you know what I mean by saying that, Kevin, this guy is a football player. He loves football. He's passionate for it. He's got good hands, runs good routes. The guy is a very good tight end. Again, where he got drafted, I have no problem with it. I think Denver got a really good football player. It's really all I got. I mean, I think we covered a lot today.
Last thing I wanted to mention, as I scroll down, I forgot about this. 6th to last pick in the draft. Northwestern's all-time leading running back, Justin Jackson, went to the Chargers. He does not have to worry about, learning the offense and being a workhorse back, being behind Melvin Gordon, obviously, for the Chargers. But you want to talk about production, easily Northwestern's most productive running back in school history. And, you can scoff at that, laugh at that, whatever. I don't care if it's San Jose State's leading runner in program history. The guy obviously has talent. And so to go 251st overall, I don't know what Justin Jackson ends up doing with his career, but I think that's a heck of a pick. 6 picks before the draft ends to take obviously the best running back in a school's history. I applaud.
I'll tell you why it was so late, Kevin. Look at his career stats and how many touches he has.
Yeah.
You talked about the life of a running back in the NFL.
Very true.
They don't see him as a franchise back. He's got a lot of mileage on those legs. That's why he fell. It's going to be a good back. And again, you're looking at value for a pick, and where's that pick? This guy has talent, but he's got a lot of mileage on the legs, so teams didn't want to take that chance. And as they're going down their draft board, as they're getting into later rounds, we don't really need to address the running back situation. We don't really need to address it. We don't need to address it. A team did late in the draft, the San Diego Chargers. They don't really need to address the running back situation, but they got a good one. But I think the reason he fell is he got so many touches in his college career, a lot of mileage on his legs. So, again, it goes back to what you were saying. When somebody hits 30 as a running back, basically they're done. They go downhill. And so you also got to look at how many touches did you have in college, start adding that into the pro level. How long is this guy going to last? That's what teams are thinking. But what a great player, what a great story. We talked about him a lot on this show during the season. Good player. Just a lot of touches, a lot of mileage on those legs.
Very true. Last point I'll make with it is if he does end up being just a very productive backup, give me a 7th-round pick for a very productive backup at any position. If that's what you get with your last pick in the draft is just a very good, depth guy for your team, I think every team would be happy. So I think the Chargers got that, I guess is my point. I've got nothing else, Troy, now that we're an hour and 2 minutes into the show.
Well, look at that. We kept her close to an hour. I mean, we really could, and we don't want to slight any of the other players that got selected, getting drafted. I mean, it's a pure honor. But as we go through and move into the season, there's going to be a lot of undrafted players also that make names for themselves. So I love the draft. I think it's a great time, and we're, of course, as a Big Ten show, want to talk about it. But I'll tell you, going back and just looking again, you mentioned the 33 young men out of the Big Ten that got drafted. Good for you. But you also said 1/3 of first-rounders don't make it. The number probably goes up as you go farther down that list. Just because you got drafted doesn't mean you're going to be a great NFL player. Doesn't even mean you're going to make a team. I mean, Jackson, the 7th-round pick, he's got to go bust his hump. He's got to go prove that he belongs on the roster. Is he going to make the team, or is he going to be one of those guys that bounces from team to team, training camp to training camp, year after year? So, it's great to hear your name called, and I don't mean to be, Debbie Downer, but you got to go work now.
Yep.
You've got to go prove yourself, even if you're Ward at number 4. You can't just walk into Cleveland and say, "Ooh, look at me! I'm the 4th player taken." You better get ready to go to work. And if you don't go to work, you won't be in the league long. But I'd like to see, the 33 players from the Big Ten. Like I said before, you asked me the question. I don't care which conference had the most drafted. I really don't. Every team is looking for a specific need. There's reasons that players fall off draft boards. There's reasons why teams take players. You're going to get me worked up. I'm going to take a deep breath. The Cleveland Browns.
Oh, yeah.
Who knows why they selected who they selected.
We'll talk about them later this week.
Yeah, we will. Again, find us on Twitter, TroyRobert967, @KidCunny. Follow the show handle, @YoungsterOldMan, all one word. If you really want to hear us get in depth about the Cleveland Browns draft and the Pittsburgh Steelers draft, I'm sure we'll throw some Tennessee Titans. I'm sure we'll throw some Green Bay Packers in there. Overall draft stuff. That show, though, just so you know, folks, 1 hour on the nose because it's on the radio. We only have an hour time slot. Big Ten show, it plays on internet radio. We can go as long as we want or short as we want. But I thought it was a good show today, Youngster. Always fun talking sports with you. Anything else for the listeners before we let them go?
No, like you said, number one pick absolutely has to show up and prove himself. But
we were trying to stay away from mentioning that name or even going down that road.
Yeah.
Stop now, Youngster. Stop now, or this show will go another 30 minutes.
Have a good day, everyone. It's been fun.
I had to stop you, Youngster. Had to. Enjoy your day, everybody. The Youngster and Old Man will get back with you next week. Have a good day.